I decided to become an architect when I was a senior in high school, I guess. The only architect I knew was Bob Brady from the Brady Bunch, and so I didn't really know what architects did, like most people. Looking back, I used to be redesigning every room I was in my head from the time I was a little kid. And so originally I thought interior design, but then I was exposed to the School of Architecture at the University of Utah, and I thought, yeah, why wouldn't I do the whole thing? I had an honors and entrance scholarship to the U, and my parents thought that was nice for me to go for free. And I did. I mean, of course, everybody wants to go away to school, but my option was to go to the U. And I did that, and in those days, there was no 4+2 program. You had to get a Master of Architecture, and it was a 3-year master's, really. And so I just did that. I spent 7 years there and got both my degrees there, and then I got out in the worst recession that we had seen in many years. I asked many of the architects that I had come in contact with during my education if I could come interview with them. And several were very nice, Boyd Blackner and a few other people, but they're not hiring. But they said I could come interview, so I did that. And in the meantime, this was in the days of the newspaper, I actually looked at the help wanted ads in the newspaper. And one day, about 2-3 weeks after I had graduated, there was an ad for an architect, which I wasn't, of course, and I didn't know who it was. So I applied for that, and I got an interview. It was at VCBO, then called Valentina Architects. And they had never hired an intern before, so they were kind of wondering if that was a good idea. There were 23 people there at the time, but after about 3 weeks, I ended up getting an offer, and I went there, and they treated me very well all the way through my career. My partner, Niels Valentiner, the founder of the company, he was always quite radically interested in anybody who was good. He didn't care if they were an immigrant, a woman. It wasn't an issue at our firm from the early days. And I was always treated super well there. I never had to ask for anything. I never had to ask for a promotion or a raise or anything. And within about 10 years, I was asked to be a partner. So once you're asked to be a partner, you're there. And I've been there 35 years. It's really an interesting thing to think back about what my focus might have been. I just wanted a job, and I didn't really know. I had worked for Brooks and Christopher one summer. I had worked for a structural engineer the summer before. I just guess I didn't really know. In school you do a variety of design projects. So I got to Valentiner at the time, and they didn't have a lot of work either. I was really lucky to get a job. And I just worked on whatever. In fact, one of my first assignments was to make a plastic model of One Utah Center, which is still there. I hate making models. I hated it then, and I did it though. And then I started to get to be allowed to work on, whoever had a job, it was a school here and there. I worked on Jordan School District prototype. I worked on Alpine School District prototype. I worked on whatever there was. But I always did love schools, and I got along very well with the two partners at the office that did schools, Boyd McAllister and Steve Crane. Sadly, both now gone from this world. They gave me a lot of opportunities. I also love libraries because I've always loved to read books. And so I worked on the Salt Lake City Public Library, which was a life-changing experience for me, actually. I got to know Moshe Safdie. He's an amazing human, a wonderful teacher, and a wonderful architect. So I got to know him, and by the time I finished that project, I was never afraid to detail anything, which is kind of funny because in school they don't teach you how to detail anything. I don't want to be mean about the University of Utah, but when I was there, there were a couple of good professors. The adjuncts were really helpful, but I didn't feel like I learned anything about architecture. I just needed to get through, get my degree, and get a job, and that's where everyone in my class will tell you this, that's where we all learned architecture, from doing it. Architectural history, that actually was my favorite class. Architectural history was the thing I did the best in of any other thing. The thing I love about architectural history is it's the first time I actually got a history class that was worth anything in my whole life. It's super ironic that I ended up designing schools and being so involved in it because I literally hated school. I hated every minute of school. Super boring. My mother taught me to take a book and put it on your lap under the desk and read because I was so bored. My mother taught me that, hilariously. But yeah, I did like geometry. That I guess is a telling sign. I liked English a lot. I originally thought that I might get an English degree, and then I thought, I don't know what you do with that.
Where did you learn to draft?
I didn't really. I just did my best in architecture school. No one taught us anything about drafting. At the time I was at the U, there was a computer system, and you would go down and you would enter coordinates. You would enter coordinates in, and I made a wireframe model of my thesis project, which was a housing project, so that I could overlay it and actually draw the building that I was designing. And then I went to Valentina, and after about 8 months, I started working on the computer there. They were pretty early adopters.
They were.
And it wasn't AutoCAD, it was I can never remember the name of it. It was some other software supposedly designed by architects for architects. We loved it. It was a digitizer pad, and you had a little pen that you would, I was like the queen of this. I was so fast at it, right? And then we got AutoCAD, which was a little adjustment. And then I became the queen of that, even to the point where, as a partner, I was still designing in AutoCAD quite a lot because I knew that software. And then we switched to Revit, which I was totally in favor of, but I didn't work on it enough to really be able to learn to use Revit. So I think it's an incredible tool, and it helps us design things. I think it's really wonderful. The client part of a job is the best part. I love finding out what they need, but I also feel like I've educated myself about the process of education. And so it's part of my job, I think, to open the minds of teachers. I don't want to go in and hear how they teach or how their classroom could be better. I want to talk about how do you imagine in your wildest dreams, what if you had no parameters? How could that be? How can we make the building facilitate that kind of a paradigm? All of the schools used to be, and many in this country still are, sadly, what we call cells and bells. So it's a hallway with classroom, etc. And the kids all go in those classrooms and they get education shoved into their little heads, right? But actually that isn't the best way to learn. The best way to learn is different for everyone. And fortunately, many of the schools of education are starting to really teach teachers that small group work, individual work, a variety of different scenarios and places, including direct instruction, which they still have to do a bit of, right, is a better way for kids to learn. And also they can get excited about it. They can be learning from each other, teaching each other. And in the pyramid of learning, once you can teach someone else, that means you've mastered it. So that's the highest level of learning that you can get to. So what we do is we design an environment where there's collaborative areas, so the students can be sent out. Now, key to that is there has to be glass so the teacher can monitor them, or an opening. Some kids are working in the classroom, some kids are working in the collaboration, some are being tutored by either an adult or their peers, and they might be doing a project, you know, like it's a lot more interesting. So one of the most wonderful things of my career is that I go to my schools and I see children and young people who are loving school.
Unlike you.
Unlike me. So one of the best things that my mentors at Valentiner did for me was I got involved with them into some of the groups like the AIA Committee on Architecture for Education. And we would go to 1 or 2 conferences a year. And the best part of those conferences is you go see what everyone else is doing. And sometimes you learn you don't want to do that. No, that isn't working at all. And sometimes you go, God, that's really working well. We could do that, and how can we make it better? Like, what could be even better? And so I had the opportunity to see way more schools and kind of the state-of-the-art schools as schools were evolving. And that was not an aha moment. That was yeah, we're doing everything pretty good, but we need collaboration. And we did that. And then, well, we're doing everything pretty good, but God, the furniture is just no good. So I had a whole experiment where I did a survey that we gave to teachers and students at an existing school. And this was in conjunction with Davis School District, who are very good stewards of the education of their children. And they got test furniture. And so we took everybody's temperature. How do you like what you're using? How does it limit you? La la la. And then after using the new kind of furniture for a month, the same questions. And so it drastically changed the way furniture was being purchased in that district, and they are kind enough to have let us participate in that process. In 2006, I went to a presentation by Ed Masria, and I was scared when I left that presentation. And he issued a challenge to us that the only people who are going to save us are architects. And so...
Why were you scared? What were you
because of the climate change.
Sure.
And only architects can do this. And so I went back to my partners and I shared some of this. And I said, how about we stop asking our clients about the things that are a no-brainer? In those days, people would ask their clients, do you want us to specify low VOC paint? I said, let's stop doing that kind of thing. Just specify low VOC paint. They don't care, you know? But it makes a difference. And so we started doing that. So we started to get more sustainability. The budget is always a great question to talk about with a school district. And they're very limited budgets, as everyone knows, and they should be. However, there is a first cost versus a life cycle cost that you have to look at. If you think about it, who builds a building that they own forever? Who?
The school district.
And universities. School districts and universities and the government. So if if anybody should know how to save money by making the right decisions, it's those people. And really, I will tell you, in Utah, all the school districts in Utah have a very good understanding of putting the right amount of money in, and we don't spend, they're actually a very good value for what you get. But one of my partners asked me, as we started down the road of net zero, which I have the only 2 buildings in Utah that are Department of Energy certified net zero, the only 2, and they're both schools. Our client started down that road with us. They went to the same kinds of conferences we went to. And you know, you're going to the Pacific Northwest and you're seeing the people in the Pacific Northwest are very, very good on sustainability. And our client said to us, Davis School District actually, said, I think we should do that. That's our goal with our next prototype. And so we did a lot of research about how do we do that, you know? And it was really fun to learn all the new stuff, and we had a consultant. But what we learned is, weirdly, it doesn't have to cost more. It is the choices that you make. So if you want brick, and net zero, you probably can't have it. If you don't mind using CMU, that's a way to save some money to put toward the rest of the building. So it's a combination to create a building like that. You have to improve the envelope. So we started doing spray foam insulation. I asked my consultants, how can we do this better? Well, you can't build it the way we used to build it. So we would build CMU, and then we would hold the metal studs off a couple inches, and we'd do spray foam insulation so there's no thermal bridging. We used to have thermal bridging. We used to have a number of walls that were uninsulated. So we improved the envelope, and then we looked at a lot of different little things we could do. Like, we were very lucky because LED lighting had just come in. So of course you do all LED lighting. You look at daylight harvesting. So when you don't have a dark day, you can have the lights off or lower. You do dimming, right? But really, one of the most important keys to our first net zero buildings was we did a geothermal well field. The ground was suitable, and that's free heating and cooling. It's a direct, indirect cooling. It's basically free. And then the other thing is PV on the roof. So it's a great story because we had a goal of like an EUI of 20 on the first building, Odyssey Elementary. Well, so for the first year, the school district hadn't bought off on the PV on the roof, so it didn't have PV on the roof. So we have the first year of operation, and we had a measured EUI of like 17.3, which is kind of astonishing, actually, you know. And in the meantime, we were meeting with the school board, and we showed them the facts, and we said, you know, in about maybe 12 years, maybe 14 years, you will have paid for those PV panels because you're saving that much energy. And that's assuming energy costs don't go up, which in 14 years, they're gonna go up, right? And the school board members looked at each other and they said, why wouldn't we do that? And it was expensive. In 2000, it opened in 2013, so at that time it was $750,000 to do the PV on the roof. And we still figured it would pay for itself that soon. Now, the same kind of school, we just opened a prototype last year. We have one finishing up for school in August. The PV for that roof is like $250,000. Like, it's gone down drastically.
That's shocking.
It's shocking, right? And so, you know, it's funny because people have asked our client, Brian Turner, FAIA, who happens to be a classmate of mine from architecture school, how long does it take to pay you back? And he goes, well, I figure it's the first day because our electric bills go down and we would have been paying them. So he goes, what does it matter? For the next 100 years, we're not going to be having electrical bills. I've been doing this for 35 years. And I guess I never thought too much about being a woman in this industry, even though there weren't very many. And it was probably based on my parents. My dad used to always say, my dad was an electrical engineer, and he'd always say, you know, Jeannie, you can be anything you want to be. And I'd said, yeah, I know that, Dad. It took me years to figure out why he told me that, you know. But when I told him I was going to be an architect, he said, don't you think you're too smart for that? Which I still laugh about to this day. But you know, when I was very fortunate because I got through school. I got out at 24. I got my license before I was 27. And so I was very hung up on being able to say I'm an architect. It was very big for me. And as soon as I became an architect, my mentors would give me jobs and take me to meet the principal and say, this is Jeanne Jackson, she'll be your architect. And I once had one client say, are you a real architect? I said, yes, I'm a licensed architect. I had job superintendents on the projects I was on that, you know, they were mostly respectful of me, amazingly. I had one where, you just have to know how young I was. I got to the job site to do my weekly meeting and everything, and sometimes my mentors would come with me, many times, but sometimes they didn't. So I had to use the restroom, and I said after we did our thing, hey, before I walk around the job site, is there a restroom I can use? This is how naive I was. And he goes, yes. He goes, get in your car, drive down the street about half a mile, and there's a Taco Bell. And then you would have a restroom. And I go, oh, thank you. Because he didn't want me to see the scary portalettes with all the graffiti.
Wow.
And it's funny, now the job site's so different. In the olden days, you would go in there and there'd be girly calendars with their shorts and a tank top. And now you go into the job site trailer and they're talking about their kids. It's just super cute. In the beginning, the first few years, it was hard. I didn't know enough, and I'd be sitting there trying to figure out how to do a door detail, and we had a binder of standard details, and I'd be going through them. I just didn't know that much about construction, to be honest. And so it was also, I'm not the kind of person that milks my work, so I would finish up, and like the partner I was working with might not be there, and I'd be sitting there going, now I'm not sure what to do, you know? And yeah, frankly, when you're right out of school, it's just a mystery a little bit. I mean, I went to a college prep school, so there were no drafting or construction classes or anything. So I don't know. I learned how to do a lot of that stuff from my dad. He was a do-it-yourselfer, but I mean, it wasn't like building a house. It was just like patching sheetrock or installing something, you know. But I think today it's a lot different. I think many young women, I mean, the U has some good hands-on classes, I guess, where you can go do some construction, which I think is nice. We try and take interns and people that are interested. When we always take them to a job site, that point out stuff to them, it's kind of good. But I think it's a different world. I think I don't know, I mean, I try to make it much more inclusive for the people that I work with. So when I was young, they wouldn't always take people to a job site, you know. But I feel like it's an investment in mentoring. You take that young person to the job site, you introduce them to your client, and pretty soon they're creating a relationship. The whole industry, I think, has gotten more just the way it ought to be. It ought to be about building a great building, you know. But as far as advancing in my firm, I didn't really have a problem because they have always been very merit-based at my office. So it's a whole plan to grow people, to help them advance and progress, and help them. Everybody's not going to be a partner, but maybe everybody doesn't want to be. There's some things about that are hard too. But everybody should be able to fulfill their dreams and fulfill what they want to do. And we need to help people do that. I've tried to mentor women as well, specifically, but I don't stick to that. I'm happy to mentor any young people that I come into contact with that get on my team. Actually, 6 of my partners started life on my team. Well, the AIA has always been really important to me. I never had a doubt that I would become a member of the AIA as soon as I was eligible. I was there working my little butt off, designing schools and, you know, seeing them through construction. And one day I thought, you know, I love this, but I think there's more. And it happened to be right then that the AIA was having elections, AIA Utah. And I decided I was going to run for treasurer. And I did, and I won. So I was the treasurer of AIA Utah as a youngster, and I got involved in it and started to meet people, and I thought, you know, this is some great stuff here. And it came out that they were looking for someone to serve on the Utah Licensing Board, and so I submitted my application for that, and I got picked. And I served 2 4-year terms on that, and I was the chair for most of it. Mainly because the people who were ahead of me wanted to do that, to advance a woman a young woman from Utah. And as a result of that, I got involved in the NCARB, the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards. I got involved in that. In the meantime, I was also involved in the AIA Committee on Architecture for Education. And both of those organizations are so dear to me. Let me start with NCARB. I started doing that in 2006 and immediately got involved in some leadership there. I led the Western Mountain region. I also was involved in about, 7 committees over 15 years. I chaired a number of them. I loved working with NCARB because we did a lot of things that advanced our profession. So for example, the interns. I was on the committee that ended up making it so they didn't have to do volunteer work as part of their, at that time, IDP, now AXP, yeah. But I also spent 4 years with a group rewriting model law, which is a model for all jurisdictions of how architectural licensing works. It was a wonderful experience. Then in the meantime, I was involved in the AIA Committee on Architecture for Education. As I said, I started to go to their conferences, maybe 2 a year, 1 a year at least. And I met all the people there and ended up being asked to join the advisory committee. And it's a path. You get on that and 6 years later, you're the chair of that committee. And I think did a lot of good in the time I was there. I loved that experience. I mean, I have lifelong friends all over this country from that experience. I started doing presentations nationally. I've done a lot of national presentations at AIA and among others, talking about what we've done in terms of collaboration, in terms of energy, in terms of all of those things. Theming is a really big thing for me in schools. And one of my partners said, "Why do you go give away all our secrets?" And I said, well, I wouldn't do it if I thought that I could design every school in this country. But I can't, and we're not going to get all those jobs. And if we did, we probably couldn't do them. But it doesn't mean that the kids don't deserve to have a better learning environment. And so I want to share that knowledge so that children can have a need and a wish to go to school every day and to learn more effectively. So that's kind of fun, but you also learn about how people run their businesses, which is really good for your office. I've also shared information. We've had a succession plan. Niels Valentiner put that into effect before I became a partner, of how to move the company along through the younger partners. And it's funny because most long-lived firms were, in the olden days, father to son to grandson or daughter or whatever, But the ones that were not that way would tend to not last. Now our firm's been in business for 50 years now, over obviously, but it's a key to succession planning. And when I meet colleagues, I always say, so how many partners do you have? Well, I have a friend in Maine, and he said, well, I don't have partners. I go, are you insane? What's going to happen when you die or when you want to retire? And he said, well, I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. When we had the recession in around 2010, I met a colleague at the AIA conference, and we were chatting about it, and I said, I'm a little worried about it, He said, well, how many people do you have? And I said, oh, we have like 80, 85 people. And he goes, and do you have enough work? And I go, I don't know. Maybe don't. And he goes, you don't have to do what I suggest, but if I were you, I would go home and I would say, we probably need to do a layoff now before we get underwater. And that's kind of a weirdly negative example, but it saved our company. We did do it. We had to lay off 16 people, but everybody else still had a job. So you learn all kinds of things from people, is the point of that. And the other thing you really learn is you don't have to hate your competitors, I mean, all the people in Utah tend to be like, ooh, I don't like them from that firm. Ooh, they're not, they're, you know, la la la. They would say mean things. And I'm the kind of person, I see them and I'm like, hey, how's it going? God, I'm really glad you got that job if I couldn't get it. I joined the AIA in 1993. And, you know, as I said, I was treasurer. And then later on, after I got my fellowship, I became AIA Utah president in 2015, and that was a big honor. But the fellowship was, I think, I always like to say, one of the top 10 days of my life was the day I was advanced to fellowship. I feel that what it does is it gives you the opportunity. We're all doing all the good we can in our communities, in our world, but it gives you some credibility. People will say to themselves, oh, well, I mean, she's a fellow in the AIA, so clearly she's done something to advance our profession, right? So that makes you trustworthy, and it makes people want to listen to you more. And I think that's one of the reasons why attaining fellowship is important. I was really fortunate. I was elevated on my first try, and it was great, but I immediately got asked to be a regional representative for the, well, actually I was asked to be a state representative first. I was Utah's representative to the region, and then I was asked to become the regional representative for our region, which the Western Mountain region. And then I was asked to become chair of the regional representatives, which is a group of about 39 people across the country. And you know, the idea being you just are there for people to mentor them. You're there to ask questions. You're there to support the missions of the college, which are basically to encourage mentorship, to support research that will help our people, our architects, do better work. And that's pretty exciting. We have a thing called the Latrobe Prize, which is an every other year award for a 2-year period. And they've usually gotten $100,000 over 2 years from us. But now we've upped it to 150. We're fortunate to be able to do that. Our latest Latrobe Prize winners are studying smog-eating building panels. We just awarded that not long ago, a month ago. And so that should be pretty exciting. So anyway, I've always been interested in supporting the missions of the college. And so I submitted to become a member of the executive committee of the college, and I was chosen. I was fortunate to be chosen. I was the bursar. So you're either the bursar, which is a fancy word for treasurer, or you're the secretary. And I was the bursar for 2 years, and then now I'm currently the vice chancellor. And in December, I'll become the chancellor. I'll be inaugurated as the chancellor of the college.
Tell us what that means.
To be the chancellor of the college means you're running, your job is to watch over the fund. That's very important. All of the executive committee does that. Increase the fund. That's very important to us because with more money, we can do more good. And then also to set policies for how we move forward. I do think about regrets, and one of my regrets is that I've never lived anywhere but Utah. I was feeling really bad about that, because I couldn't go away to school. You know, I got out with no student debt, so there's that. But getting that job and then, you know, getting sucked into this firm and that always has treated me well, I had no reason to go elsewhere. And so my regret is that, you know, I travel a lot. I love to travel, but I feel like I've never had the opportunity to have a different experience. But it's funny, I was telling one of my colleagues this at work, and he said, this was quite recently, and he said, you know what you were missing is the advantage of only working for one firm for all these years is you were here long enough to make changes, to help improve it. And you know, someone who comes in, you know, when they've worked somewhere else for a long time, who's going to listen to them? You've been here and you know the history, and you've helped change for the better, and I value that insight. Oh, I love that question, the advice for younger architects. I think it's very important to be involved in more than just yourself. I think being involved in some organization, learning more about it, being an architect isn't just going to work. Being an architect is a lot more than that. You have to have a passion for it. If you're gonna, I think that's part of doing well in it too. The people that do seem to do well are the people with a real passion for it. I do have a real passion for school design, but I didn't set out to have a passion for school design. I like to say that school design architects are the obstetricians of architects. We get the happiest job because we get all those little children and young people that we can make their lives so much better. I mean, the schools I've designed and participated in have maybe been open for 30. How many kids go through a school in 30 years? And I think those schools will easily last 90. How many lives will I have helped touch, right? It's an awesome responsibility, but it's an exciting thing too. I think it's what makes me happy about it.